USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to the Weekend Review podcast for Monday, December 2nd, 2019. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Let's start with last week's game of the week. It was red-hot hockey at Madison Square Garden. Cornell blanked Boston University 2-0, and it sounds like this year's Cornell Big Red is quintessential Cornell.
It really is. You know, they're a very tough team to play against. I think that they're heavy. They can really lock you down defensively at times, but they have a little bit of speed, and when they use it, they can generate the offense. Listening to Mike Schaefer after the game on Saturday, wasn't pleased with his team's start, but they found a way to score both goals, a 2-0 win, both goals coming in a span of 20 seconds. That's all. I mean, if you were looking for a lot of offense and you're sitting in Madison Square Garden, you were a little disappointed on Saturday night. But for sure, the Cornell faithful, they're happy to take that win. They stay perfect on the season, 9-0 thus far. It's a great start for them. And for Boston University, that's back-to-back games they're shut out. They're probably searching for a lot of answers right now.
Is it time to sound the alarm for BU?
It might be. Yeah, I think it might be. This is a team that has way too much talent to not be scoring goals. Their midweek loss was a 4-0 loss to Sacred Heart. You know, these are games that you've got to start getting more, maybe more important than even talking about individual games. They've got to get the apple cart going in the right direction. They've got to find ways to score goals. They've had, early in the season, they were scoring goals and they had problems closing out games. Now they're in a position where it's not even about getting into a position where you can close out a game. They're not even getting that opportunity because they're not putting the puck in the net. So, yeah, I don't know what needs to change. I haven't seen them live in person in a few weeks. I got to watch them on tape against Vermont. And a lot of what they did in that game looked good. Their defense had a few breakdowns, and Vermont was able to put a few in. But, this is a team, I think they have one win in their last 5 games. That's just not going to cut it. They're not playing the hockey that the roster, the talent on their roster says they should.
And they've got a big test coming up on Tuesday against Harvard, so things don't get any easier right off the bat.
No, certainly, and Harvard's going to be a little hungry. They took their first loss against Boston College over the weekend, so this, you got to have a nice, hungry Harvard team going against a BU team that's in desperation mode. I mean, they cannot go down into the break, not playing well. That's just not the formula for success. You've got to have a little bit of confidence as you head out into the break, and they're getting to that point in their season.
Well, we're talking about Harvard. They had their first loss of the season, as you mentioned. Meanwhile, Boston College, who downed them, they have snuck up on everybody. They've gone on a 7-game winning streak.
Yeah, and we put together some notes for the show. I called it a quiet 7-game winning streak because I didn't realize that that's what it had stretched to. But they're picking off opponents here and there. They're getting a weekend sweep when they need it. They play a few, single games. They haven't had a ton of double games in that stretch where they're playing 2-2. So you sometimes can forget that they're playing so well. But a nice win over Yale last Tuesday night, then the win, a come from behind win where they fell behind 2-0. Over at Bright Landry Hockey Center on Saturday and found a way to, it was Friday, I guess, found a way to come back and win that game 4-2. So they're doing a lot of things well right now. They've moved right up into the middle of the pairwise. I mean, they're in a very good position. I think that they'd like some more league wins, and they'd like to make sure that they can solidify their position in Hockey East as well. They're right up there in the top 3 right now. But I think that this is a very good sign for BC. Remember, don't forget, we're not too far removed from this team not being able to win out of conference. So very good sign for this BC team right now.
As we go out west, number 1 Minnesota State probably has assured itself number 1 again in this week's USCHO.com poll, and voters are putting in their ballots as we record this. Number 1 Minnesota State sweeping Minnesota Duluth on the road, 4-1 and 3-1. Saturday, a massive snowstorm, and I guess only about 1,500 people or so were able to get to the arena for that game on Saturday. But Minnesota State, they are really this weekend in particular, now some people have said, well, they have schedules against a weaker league with the WCHA. And of course, the PairWise is meant to accommodate for that. But 2 wins over the defending national champion in convincing fashion really stamps number 1 on the Mavericks.
Yeah, everything is going right for them right now. They're playing well. They're defending well. They're getting good goaltending. They're getting opportunistic scoring. This is a formula for success. They are doing everything they need to be doing right now. They've got their top players are scoring. Their back end is playing well. Their goaltender is a standout at this point. Just 1 goal against in each of the 2 games this weekend. I love this team, and I'm very impressed with the fact that they've been able to kind of run out of the gate here, put together the wins, play some tough opponents in that stretch. And I think that's, I know you can say WCHA till you blue in the face, but the reality is their schedule has been pretty tough thus far. And they've come away, really looking like the top team in the country. There's no doubt in my mind. It's not a difficult vote for me every week to put them number 1. When they falter, if they ever falter, certainly I'll be able to look that up. And you've got a Cornell team that's undefeated right now, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. But I still think that Minnesota State right now, they're just such a favorite. And now they're going to go into that WCHA play where they have some weaker opponents, and if they continue to roll like this, I just can't see them losing a lot of games this season.
Well, number 1 Minnesota State and probably number 2 Cornell are standing in the way of number 3 North Dakota at the top of the USCHO.com poll. How about the Fighting Hawks? They have an 11-game unbeaten streak, a huge onslaught, a butt kicking, as you described it on Thursday, 9-2 over Minnesota. And it's the first time 9 goals have been scored by an opponent at Mariucci Arena, the new one, since it opened in 1993. So that's unprecedented. A little bit closer, nail biter on Friday, 3-2. But how about those Fighting Hawks?
Unbelievable. I think that, having 2 off seasons by their programs, the definitions the last 2 years, a lot of people had very low expectations. I think we've said this before, but everything, it's similar to Minnesota State. They're getting a lot of contributions. They're getting a lot of different players able to score goals. And then you just throw in a goaltender that's playing well. And, they're a very tough team to play against typically anyways. But when things are clicking, their power play is clicking right now. I mean, to put up 9 goals, I'm sitting at home on Thanksgiving night and just kind of watching the box score or the live score and just watching goals go in and in and in and in. They never wanted to stop. And, this team, will definitely, if there was any doubt in the fans up in Grand Forks in their minds coming into this season, maybe coming out of last season, a kind of a disappointing year where they, basically it was 2 losses to Canisius that kept them out of an NCAA tournament. And, fans couldn't stop talking about that this summer. And here they are, and they are ready to go. This is a team that will be right there at the top of the NCHC, right there at the top of the poll, right there at the top of the PairWise, as long as they keep producing the way they are. And this is a dangerous team. I don't think a lot of people were thinking about them. We thought about Duluth. We thought about Denver. We didn't. Maybe even people were thinking about St. Cloud, and they've been just an absolute train wreck to this point. And here we are with North Dakota right back in there, 11 games, 10-0-1 over their last 11. That's a great span.
And on the other side, Minnesota off to a slower start than they might have hoped. Now, obviously, Bob Motzko is a great coach with a terrific pedigree and track record. And everybody knew that he was coming in to kind of rebuild things with the Gophers. And it takes time to put your stamp on a program. But I don't think those Minnesota fans are interested in being patient. It seems like there's going to be unreasonable pressure put on Motzko right off the bat here.
I agree with you there. And I think the right word is unreasonable. I don't think that he took over a program that was in that great of a state. Not that Don Lucia was, letting it just, fall to the ashes. But at the same time, I think that, there were some problems within those last couple of Don Lucia teams, even though some of them were right up there, top of the Big Ten, always in the NCAA tournament, but didn't have kind of the chemistry. And I think that's what they're trying to put back together. I hope that Bob Motzko can do that. He's a great coach, and I love a lot of things about his team. He's got some really good speed. There's a lot of skill on the team. Has a good goaltender who's played well at times this year. Maybe not last Thursday night, certainly. But I'm just kind of a little perplexed. I think that they should be better. But it's amazing for me to look around the country. We'll get to it a little later, but I started looking at the PairWise and looking at the teams that are in the top 16 of the PairWise right now. I shake my head because there's so many great teams that aren't in the top 16. And I think it's kind of endemic across college hockey that we all have certain expectations, perennial expectations. One is that Minnesota will be good. And sometimes you got to temper that. I do hope that there is some patience in the Minnesota fans, because just because you hire a great coach doesn't mean that you're going to immediately see results. And I think they need to be a little bit patient. I don't know if they will be. I don't think of anybody I know as a Gopher fan who tends to be very patient.
Well, I hope our listeners will be patient for a moment. We've got more of Weekend Review coming right up.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online.
This is Weekend Review from USCHO.com for Monday, December 2nd. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. It was a big statement for the WCHA with a win over an NCHC team and the defending national championship winner, University of Minnesota Duluth. But it was also a big one for the WCHA against the Big Ten. And Bowling Green's home sweep of Notre Dame really says something great about the Falcons. They stumbled a little bit early on in the season, but it seems like the momentum and the continued growth that program found under Chris Bergeron continues under Ty Eigner.
Yeah, I was really impressed. These weren't just wins; these were kind of decisive wins. I know there's different ways goals go in and all of that sort of stuff, but 5-2, 5-2 back-to-back nights against Notre Dame. That's impressive, and that's a huge positive for Bowling Green. It's a huge positive for the WCHA, as you mentioned. You're talking about two very good programs in Duluth and Notre Dame getting swept by two teams that in this WCHA, the people they're just automatically so down on. Yes, there hasn't been a lot of success from that league of late, especially in the NCAA tournament, but these are some good teams, and they're putting together very good seasons, excellent seasons for these clubs. You can even throw Michigan Tech into that mix the way that they've played here early. There's been some good stories out of the WCHA to date, and I don't think that they're going away. I mean, these are, very, very talented teams that they're not jumping up and surprising anybody. If you're going in and playing a WCHA team like a Bowling Green, like a Michigan Tech, like a Minnesota State, even like a Northern Michigan, and you underestimate them, you're going to get your clocks cleaned. You're going to get your head handed to you. And I think that in some ways, sometimes that has been what's happened. And at the same time, the performances on the ice, prove that there's a lot of talent in that league right now.
And again, we're going to get to the PairWise in a few moments, but those wins by Minnesota State and Bowling Green and success on Michigan Tech has all of them in the top 16 in the PairWise. Minnesota State at 2, Bowling Green at 6, and Tech at 11. Well, let's jump to tournaments. The Friendship 4 happened again. Winning the belt pot was Northeastern, number 12 Northeastern, winning that championship game over Colgate.
Yeah, and what a great trip for Northeastern. They went over there in the inaugural one, which is, this was the 5th edition. So 4 years ago, they were there. And that was a bad team at that point. They ended up losing the opener in overtime to Lowell, lost the lead in the late part of the game, and then lost in over. They ended up winning their consolation game, but just losing that first game took them out of contention for the trophy. Now that team came back and ended up going on a run. They ended up winning the Hockey East Championship back in 2016. Here they are. They go back over, and they were determined. And, talking to Jim Madigan last week, it just sounded like they were so determined. They shut out New Hampshire in the opener 4-0, and then a pretty pesky team there, Colgate. They played very well. Northeastern scored 3 goals in 55 seconds, 3 goals on 3 shots in 55 seconds in the first period, and then really didn't do anything offensively the rest of the game. Colgate scratched and clawed and got within a goal Northeastern got an empty netter, and then Colgate scored a late goal. I believe it was either right at the end of a power play. I think it was just after a power play was over with a goalie pulled and made it interesting. But for Northeastern, good for them. Great for their program. They celebrated it like it was a bean pot, looking at those kids, jumping up and down on TV. And the mayor of Boston was over there with them this time, which was a very nice touch to be able to do it in front of the mayor. So that continues to be just a great event. Maybe the crowds aren't as loud. Looking at some of the numbers, instead of having 6,000-7,000, it was more like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 a game. But those are 4 separate admissions that you're still ending up putting in about, by the time the weekend's over, about 16,000, 17,000 fans, most of whom don't usually see college hockey over in Northern Ireland, and they seem to love the event.
The other tournament, and I guess it finally does have a name, the Turkey Leg Classic, UMass Lowell and Merrimack combining with preset opponents. UMass Lowell downed Penn State in overtime 3-2. And I don't know whether they get a turkey leg, a gold-plated turkey leg, some sort of a cup or something. I'm sure there's some sort of a trophy they get there. But that was a big win for UMass Lowell as they continue to work their way up the rankings.
Yeah, I did get a chance to see the trophy, kind of just a pretty nondescript trophy. Maybe they need to change it to a bronze turkey leg or something like that. But you're right. That's a real statement win for Lowell. They had a week off before this tournament. Prior to that, they had a tie and a loss to UConn. It was their first blemish, first loss in hockey's play this season. And I think that they came out of that weekend a little bit disappointed. They were very fatigued. Norm Bay's instead. They started their season with 7 straight 2-game series, a lot of travel in there. And they felt, he felt the team was a little bit mentally fatigued. That weekend, they had gone through midterms and all that sort of stuff. Now they had a chance to reset, get that bye week, and they came in. They played very good hockey over the 2 nights and almost won the championship game in regulation. It was a late deflection with, I think, 23 seconds left in regulation. And then Tyler Wall, a great job, flashed his pad with about 3.5 minutes left in the overtime to make a huge save. And then right down at the other end, a power play goal. Chase Blackman with the power play goal to win it for the Riverhawks. But that can get them on the right path. Now, this is not the end for them. They have another series this weekend before the break, 2 against Providence. That's been a team that's given them fits over the year. They did win earlier this year down at Providence. So I think there's some good hockey ahead for Lowell. It's a nice statement for them. Penn State, I think they'll probably go out of that weekend saying, hey, we did some good things. They handily beat Merrimack the first night. I believe it was 7-0. And then, they hung with the Riverhawks on the road, and they showed a lot of fight. They kept battling back to tie the game. Ultimately, they a power play goal ended up being the decisive goal. But Penn State, that's a pretty good Penn State team right there. Having gotten to watch them a little bit this weekend.
Let's take a few moments on Atlantic hockey. The team that has snuck up on everybody is Army. They've won 6 of their last 7 games, including 3 this past week, AIC on Tuesday, and a sweep at Canisius. AIC, meanwhile, swept a team that was the only team they didn't beat last season in their storybook season. They swept RAT at home. And then Niagara, 4-0-1 in their last 5 after they started out 0-8-1 to get things rolling. Things are going well for those teams I mentioned, but what it also means is, yet again, there's a tight jumble at the top of the standings in Atlantic hockey.
Yeah, certainly there is. Robert Morris had kind of come out of the chute really quickly. They, strangely, a game had to be canceled or postponed, I guess, on Friday night. At Mercyhurst, there was some problem with some lighting that was loose, and they ended up postponing the game. They ended up getting a tie on Saturday night. I believe they got the extra overtime point, so that's decent. But there's Army, playing 3 league games in the week. They win all 3, and boom, look at that. They're tied for first place. Here they are with 24 points, matching Robert Morris. But you mentioned AIC and Niagara. Boy, slow starts for those teams. It's good to see them turn it around. Niagara, I think I had a lot of high expectations for them. To see them start whatever it was, 0-8-1, just kind of befuddled me. I think Jason Lammers would say the same thing. But a good turnaround, 4-0-1. And AIC, that's an RIT team that's given them fits. That it has been a very good team at times this year. So getting those 2 wins at home, those will go a long way as well.
It's an RIT team also where the coach, Wayne Wilson, is a little bit mystified. It seems like things are a mental problem right now for that team, not skill-wise. Back to Army, what a terrific team Brian Riley has this year. Trevin Kozlowski has been outstanding in goal for them, and he missed a chunk of the season last year with injury. So to have him solid and healthy is really helping things happen for the Black Knights. While we're talking Atlantic hockey, there's still a lot of non-league games for that league, about 20 of them, and about a third of them are going to be against Arizona State. Now, Arizona State had a win and a tie against Vermont. Now they're 7-4-1, and as we record, they're 16th in the pairwise. There are pairwise implications for Atlantic hockey and pairwise implications for the Sun Devils that all revolve around games with each other. It's pretty interesting, but back into the mix of things is Arizona State.
Yeah, when you're an independent team and you put together your own schedule, you don't have, you hope that the teams that are on your schedule are strong. So if you beat them, you kind of get a bump in your RPI. If you lose to them, you don't have as big of a drop in your RPI. So that has been the case in certain parts for Arizona State. And, even if they've lost some games early in the season, some of them were to opponents that at least the conference that those opponents play in had a decent RPI. And I think that's what's giving them a little bit of a boost. A 7-4-1 record. What will be most difficult for them, I just mentioned Lowell, the fact that they played for 7 consecutive weekends without a break, 2 games each weekend. That is the life for Arizona State from here on out. They do not have a weekend off until the first weekend of March when everybody else is getting into tournament mode. They will be ending, their season will be all over, their regular season, but at that they will have played 13 consecutive 2-game back-to-back series without a single break in their season. That when you're an independent, you have to put together strange things in your schedule. They had most of the month of November off. Now there is no more time off. So that is one that you have to see how it plays out. Will there be some fatigue? Will there be some mental fatigue? Will there be some physical fatigue? Will injuries take a toll? So that is the one thing to watch when you're talking about Arizona State, is how they're going to handle really a schedule with no days off.
Yeah, it is what it is, and they're going to have to take them one game at a time, as the cliche goes. Well, one last thing that we wanted to talk about here. Now we're at the beginning of December. It's the 2nd of December, and the pairwise starts to take shape right about now. And it's a little interesting right now. Once you get into mid-January, then things are a little harder to move. But there are some teams on the outside looking in, and maybe some surprising teams in the pairwise. But if we just go through that quickly, seeing Cornell, Minnesota State, North Dakota, and then let's throw in Denver at the very top. None of those are surprising. You would have expected at least 3 of those to be there. Maybe some people were looking past Cornell, and maybe people were underestimating North Dakota. Those teams being up there are no surprise.
No, not with the results that they've put up to date. I mean, the 2 teams combined are 21-1-2. So you'd expect them to be near the top of the pairwise. You really don't see a lot of surprises. We know that Bowling Green just came off a great weekend, so they got a good pairwise boost. They're up to number 6, 10 wins thus far this season. Penn State, I just mentioned, they've got nothing to worry about the way they're playing. They just have to keep on keeping on. Notre Dame, they've taken a dip because they were, when I looked at the pairwise again, we're looking at it in early mid-November, not as easy to kind of get much form out of it, but they were way up there in the top 3 spots for a while. Now they've slipped down to 9. The team that I think surprises me and surprises everybody at this point is probably Michigan Tech. They're 8-7, yet at 11 in the pairwise, and that just shows how tough their schedule has been to date. They've played the toughest teams in their conference. They've played tough teams outside of their conference. Yes, maybe they haven't been the best, but 8-7 against a very difficult schedule at this point will help. And the other one is Minnesota Duluth. They've had some very difficult opponents on their schedule to date, and that helps them as well. I mean, they're only 7-6-1, and I say only 7-6-1, but there's no other team besides Harvard. And Harvard, of course, only has played 7 games, but there's no other team besides Minnesota Duluth in the top 14 that only has 7 wins. Everybody else has 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 wins at this point. So that's another one that's maybe kind of catches my eye. After that, Western Michigan at 7-5-2. I think that, that one, we'll see how that plays out. They've had some good wins. They've had some bad losses. We mentioned Arizona State, and then the bubble. Arizona State kind of sits in that bubble, and you look at it, it's the Hockey East bubble right now. 17 is UMass Lowell, 18 is Providence, 19 is Northeastern. 3 teams that have had very good starts, but if they had a little bit more consistency, we'd be looking at them in the top 10, maybe the top 5. So if they develop consistency, that's big. And then right there at 20, we just mentioned them. There's Army. That's the first Atlantic hockey team. And, you're talking about 20. You're talking about a couple of wins, increasing your RPI a little bit, and you're in the top 15 of the PairWise. That's something to keep an eye on, is how a team like Army and some other Atlantic hockey teams as well, there's nobody really that high. I guess RIT at 29 is the next one. But keep an eye on Army, if they can put together a nice little run here, they could sneak up into the middle of the PairWise, by the time we get to January. And as you mentioned, once you get to January, the motion in the PairWise reduces significantly. There's so many games played. So keep an eye on Army. That's one that really interests me as well.
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, about 20 non-league games left for Atlantic hockey. Army has Providence on its schedule as a non-conference matchup. If Atlantic hockey can get around 500 in those remaining games, that would put them just a little bit below 400 in an out-of-conference record. Picking up 2 wins last week moves that league to 314. WCHA at 434. A few pickups there would help. But the league that is really down in out-of-conference record this season is ECAC. Right now, as we record at 1932-7, they're just 388 out of conference, losing record against Hockey East, 722-3, really the biggest part of that.
Yeah, and then you conversely say Hockey East success right now, they're almost at 600. They're just behind the NCHC, which is at 605. Hockey East 597. Those are the top 2. Hockey East wouldn't be there without the ECAC. I mean, they've really hammered some of the ECAC opponents thus far this season. You look at they go over to Belfast and pick up the 2. They end up picking up 2 non-league wins over there on the championship and consolation game. The teams that have come into some of the Hockey East buildings just haven't had a lot of success, and that's a big factor, in this ECAC league. When we look at the PairWise, yes, they've got Cornell up there. Yes, they've got Harvard. Yes, they've got Clarkson up there. But then it becomes a pretty good dip. Yeah, you're looking at, Dartmouth is sitting there at 24th, and then Quinnipiac at 28. But much of the rest of the league is way down in 40 or below in the PairWise, which that's just showing that your overall conference RPI is significantly diminished, and that could, if you have Harvard and Cornell continue on these rolls and end up the season each with 3-4 losses, you'll have no problem getting 2 teams in, maybe a third. But when you have a really low conference RPI, the thought of getting 3 teams in the tournament is that much more difficult.
Especially you look at Brown at 3-7, Princeton at 1-6-3, Yale at 2-7, St. Lawrence 3-11-2, Union 3-11-0. Some difficult seasons in the first half for those schools, and that is part of what's dragging things down for the ECAC. But as we go along, we'll see how things work out. Heavily weighting into the PairWise is the RPI, because if there's a tie in the other categories, the RPI is the tiebreaker and essentially gets counted twice. RPI differences can be very narrow. So the difference in RPI between being in the tournament and out of the tournament is only third place decimal points. So things are going to be volatile as they go along and get into January. Maybe as we get to February 1st, things will settle down a bit. But even so, those bubble teams, they've really got to watch out.
They certainly do. And, at the same time, the teams that we can really talk about as we head to the new year, that top 5 is there's some historical data that if you can be in the top 5 when you come back from the holiday exam break, then the odds of you missing the tournament are significantly decreased. You usually make it. If you can be top 5 by the time the calendar changes to the next year, you're probably going to make the tournament. So that, there's a lot of volatility left. That's why we actually publish the PairWise, is so people can kind of track this. The only day the PairWise matters, as we always say, is the last day of the season when all the games are played. But as fans, we just love to watch this, and it is an okay barometer, not the best barometer, but it's an okay barometer to kind of understand how your team's doing.
The fun wild card in the whole thing really is Arizona State, and we'll kind of wrap up with this thought. If it weren't for Arizona State, by the middle of January, most of the non-conference games would be done. But Arizona State will keep that going, and they, by themselves, add volatility to the PairWise that might not otherwise be there.
They do. You kind of do forget that, is that they account, it used to be just the Beanpot games in February, Harvard, Northeastern, BCBU. That was really about it. So once you got into, say, around, January 12th, there wasn't much non-league hockey, but now you're going to have to definitely have a lot of games against Arizona State. Like I said, they have, I believe after last weekend, they still have 24 games to go every single weekend. The last 12 weekends of the season, they'll all be playing. They'll be playing some of these opponents. So you're right. Those games can factor a lot into where RPIs move and how that affects the PairWise.
Well, we'll keep an eye on the PairWise as we move along. We have weekend review on Mondays, on Tuesdays, USCHO Spotlight, and later in the week, usually on Thursday, USCHO Game of the Week Preview Podcast. Find them all at uscho.com/podcasts. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.